Every single morning before the world demands anything from you, a quiet battle has already begun. Not outside of you, inside you, before the phone lights up, before the news tells you what to fear, before yesterday's regrets or tomorrow's anxieties knock on the door. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Most people lose that battle before they even get out of bed. They wake up already tired, already overwhelmed, already replaying conversations that haven't happened yet or mistakes that can't be undone, and they think this is normal. But what if it isn't? What if the quality of your life has less to do with how hard you work and everything to do with how clearly you think, especially in the first moments of your day? Stay with me, because if you can change what happens in your mind every morning, you don't just change your day, you change the direction of your life. You see, your mind is designed to protect you, not to inspire you. It scans for danger. It remembers pain more vividly than progress. And if left unchecked, it will fill your mornings with doubt, comparison, fear, and stories that were never true to begin with. That voice that says you're behind, you're not enough, today is going to be hard. That voice isn't wisdom, it's habit. And habits, once understood, can be changed. Clearing your mind doesn't mean silencing every thought. That's impossible. It means choosing which thoughts deserve your energy, because not every thought is a fact. Not every feeling is a signal, and not every worry belongs to today. The problem is, most people start their mornings in reaction mode. They react to messages, they react to news, they react to pressure. And when you begin your day reacting, you spend the rest of the day recovering. But people who live with purpose do something different. They create space before noise. They choose intention before information. They decide who they want to be before the world tells them who they should be. A clear mind in the morning is not about positivity. It's about alignment between who you are and why you're here. Ask yourself this. If your mind is full of toxic thoughts every morning, how can you expect clarity in your decisions? If your inner dialogue is hostile, how can you show up calm, focused, and confident? You cannot build a meaningful life on a cluttered mental foundation. That's why the morning matters. Because whatever you allow into your mind first becomes the lens through which you see everything else. When your morning begins with intention, you respond instead of react. You listen instead of assume. You lead instead of follow fear. And slowly, quietly, something shifts. You stop arguing with yourself. You stop carrying yesterday into today. You stop letting imagined futures steal present strength. Clearing your mind is not about controlling life. It's about controlling your relationship with it. Some mornings will still be heavy. Some thoughts will still show up uninvited. But clarity is not the absence of struggle. It's the presence of direction. And when you choose clarity every morning, even for a few minutes, you remind yourself of something powerful. You are not your thoughts. You are the one who decides which thoughts lead. And that decision, made daily, quietly, consistently, is how ordinary mornings turn into extraordinary lives. That is why this matters. Your day doesn't begin when you open your eyes. It begins when you choose what deserves your attention. That choice is made long before your feet touch the floor, before your phone lights up, before the world has a chance to pull you in 1,000 different directions. In that quiet space between waking and engaging, something powerful happens. Or something dangerous. Because attention is not neutral. Whatever you give it to grows stronger. Whatever you ignore slowly loses its grip. Most people believe their mornings are controlled by alarms, responsibilities, and routines. But the truth is far more subtle and far more personal. Your morning is controlled by where your mind goes first. The moment you wake up, your brain starts offering you options. Some are loud, some are familiar, some are heavy. It brings up unfinished conversations, worries about the future, regrets from the past, comparisons you didn't ask for, fears that feel urgent even when they're not. And because these thoughts arrive automatically, we assume they are important. We assume they deserve attention. But automatic does not mean meaningful. Familiar does not mean true. Urgent does not mean essential. Yet every morning, millions of people hand over their attention without question. And in doing so, they set the emotional tone for the entire day. Attention is the gateway to experience. What you focus on shapes how you feel, how you interpret events, how you treat others, and how you see yourself. If your attention goes first to stress, your day feels heavy before it even begins. If it goes to fear, everything feels like a threat. If it goes to comparison, nothing you do feels enough. This is not because the world is suddenly worse in the morning, but because attention acts like a filter. It decides what matters and what fades into the background. When you don't choose that filter consciously, your mind chooses it for you based on habit, past pain, and survival instincts that were never designed for modern life. Most people don't suffer because their lives are objectively terrible. They suffer because their attention is constantly hijacked. They wake up and immediately give their focus to notifications, headlines, other people's opinions, and imagined outcomes. Their mind is scattered before their body has fully woken up. And then they wonder why they feel anxious, unfocused, or exhausted by midday. It's because attention, once fragmented, is difficult to reclaim. The first things you attend to in the morning don't just fill your mind for a moment. They set a precedent. They teach your brain what to prioritize. They silently answer the question, what kind of day is this going to be? Choosing what deserves your attention is an act of leadership. It's you deciding that not every thought gets a vote, not every worry gets airtime, not every distraction gets access to your inner world. This choice is subtle, almost invisible to others, but it has enormous consequences. When you consciously choose your attention, you move from reaction to intention. You stop being pulled by whatever is loudest and start being guided by what matters most. This doesn't mean ignoring reality or pretending problems don't exist. It means understanding that clarity comes before problem solving, not after. The mind loves to convince you that everything needs immediate attention, that if you don't think about it now, something will go wrong. But most of the thoughts that rushing during the morning are recycled. They are yesterday's fears wearing today's clothes. They feel urgent because they are familiar, not because they are useful. Giving them attention doesn't solve them, it strengthens them. The more you focus on a thought, the more your brain assumes it's important. The more important it feels, the harder it is to let go. This is how people get trapped in mental loops that start before breakfast and follow them all day. When you choose what deserves your attention, you interrupt that loop. You create a pause. And in that pause, you remember something essential. You are not obligated to engage with every thought your mind produces. Thoughts are suggestions, not commands. Feelings are signals, not instructions. The power of the morning lies in recognizing this before momentum takes over. Once the day is in full motion, choices become harder. Distractions multiply. Emotions escalate. But in the morning, when the world is still quiet, your influence over your own mind is at its strongest. Attention, when chosen wisely, becomes a stabilizing force. Instead of scanning for what might go wrong, you orient toward what gives meaning. Instead of starting the day asking, what do I have to deal with? You start by asking, who do I want to be today? That single shift changes everything. Because when your attention is anchored in identity and purpose, external events lose some of their power over you. Challenges don't disappear, but they stop defining you. Pressure doesn't vanish, but it no longer dictates your self-worth. This is why mornings are not about productivity hacks or rigid routines. They are about alignment. Alignment between your values and your focus. Alignment between your inner world and the actions you are about to take. When attention is aligned, energy flows more naturally, decisions become clearer, reactions soften, you listen better, you respond more thoughtfully, and over time, this daily choice compounds. A single morning might not feel transformative, but hundreds of mornings built on intentional attention reshape how you experience life. Choosing what deserves your attention also means accepting that some things don't deserve it, no matter how loudly they demand it. Not every criticism needs a response. Not every comparison needs contemplation. Not every fear needs exploration. Some thoughts only exist to drain energy, not to offer insight. Letting them pass is not avoidance, it's discernment. It's understanding that your attention is finite, and where you invest it determines the return you get on your emotional and mental well-being. When people say they don't have control over their thoughts, what they often mean is that they've never practiced controlling their attention. You can't stop thoughts from appearing, but you can stop feeding them. And the best time to practice that skill is when the day is still open, when the slate hasn't been filled with obligations and noise. Each morning gives you a chance to reset the relationship between you and your mind, to remind yourself that you are the observer, not the storm. Over time, this practice changes how mornings feel. Waking up becomes less about bracing for impact and more about setting direction. The day no longer feels like something that happens to you, but something you step into with awareness. And that awareness starts with a simple but profound decision, deciding what deserves your attention before everything else tries to claim it for you. Toxic thoughts are not facts. They are unexamined stories your mind repeats. They sound convincing because they are familiar, not because they are true. The mind is a powerful storyteller, and like any storyteller, it fills in gaps, exaggerates risks, and edits memories to fit a narrative it already believes. These stories often begin quietly, almost politely, but over time they grow louder, more authoritative, until they feel like absolute truth. The danger is not that these thoughts exist, but that they go unquestioned. When a story is repeated often enough, the mind stops treating it as a possibility and starts treating it as reality. Most toxic thoughts are built from fragments of past experiences. A failure becomes proof that you always fail. A rejection becomes evidence that you are not worthy. A difficult moment becomes a prediction that life will always be hard. The mind connects these fragments into a story designed to protect you from future pain. It tells you to stay small, to avoid risk, to expect disappointment. From the mind's perspective, this makes sense. If you expect the worst, you won't be surprised. If you don't try, you can't fail. But protection and growth rarely travel together. What keeps you safe can also keep you stuck. The reason these thoughts feel so real is because they are emotional, not logical. They come attached with sensations in the body, a tight chest, a knot in the stomach, a heaviness in the shoulders. The body reacts as if the story is happening now, even if it's based on something that happened years ago or something that might never happen at all. This physical response convinces you further that the thought must be true. After all, why would it feel so intense if it weren't? But intensity is not accuracy. The body responds to imagination almost as strongly as it responds to reality. Onexamen thoughts thrive on speed. They rush in, make a judgment, and move on before you have time to question them. I'm not good enough. This will go wrong. People can't be trusted. These statements arrive fully formed with no footnotes, no sources, no cross-examination. And because they arrive quickly, they bypass awareness. You don't notice them, you become them. They shape your mood, your posture, your decisions, all without asking for permission. This is how a single thought in the morning can quietly dictate the tone of an entire day. What makes these stories toxic is not just their negativity, but their rigidity. They leave no room for nuance, growth, or change. They speak in absolutes always, never, everyone, no one. They reduce complex human experiences into simple, limiting conclusions. And once those conclusions are accepted, behavior follows. You hesitate, you withdraw, you overcompensate, you settle. The story becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, not because it was true to begin with, but because you acted as if it were. Examining a thought does not mean fighting it or trying to force it away. Resistance often strengthens the story. Examination means slowing down enough to observe it, to notice its language, to ask where it came from and what it's trying to do. Many toxic thoughts are borrowed. They come from things you were told repeatedly, from environments that rewarded fear or punished confidence, from moments when you were hurt and didn't yet have the tools to process it. The mind took those moments and built a rule. That rule may have helped once, but that doesn't mean it still applies. When you examine a thought, you begin to see its cracks. You notice how selective it is with evidence, how it ignores moments that contradict it. A thought that says you always fail conveniently forgets the times you succeeded. A thought that says you're unlovable overlooks the people who care about you. This selective memory is not intentional dishonesty. It's efficiency. The mind prefers simple stories because they require less energy. But simplicity at the cost of truth creates suffering. There is a quiet power in labeling a thought for what it is, a story. Not a prophecy, not an identity, not a fact. Just a narrative your mind is offering. When you do this, space opens up between you and the thought. You are no longer inside it, you are looking at it. And in that space, choice returns. You may still feel the emotion. The story may still repeat. But it loses its authority. It no longer speaks as the final word, but as one voice among many. Toxic thoughts often repeat because they are familiar, and familiarity feels safe to the brain. Even a painful story can feel safer than uncertainty. Letting go of a story, even a limiting one, means stepping into the unknown. It means admitting that the future is not fully predictable, that you are capable of change. That past patterns do not have to define what comes next. This uncertainty can feel uncomfortable at first, so the mind pulls you back to what it knows. That's why awareness must be practiced, not assumed. As you begin to notice these stories, you may realize how often they influence your choices. You might see how many decisions were made not from clarity, but from fear dressed up as logic. You might notice how often you said no when you wanted to say yes, how often you stayed silent when you wanted to speak, how often you settled for less because the story told you that more wasn't possible. This realization can be painful, but it is also liberating. Because once a story is seen clearly, it can be questioned. And once it is questioned, it can be rewritten. Rewriting a story does not mean replacing it with blind optimism. It means allowing complexity. It means acknowledging that you have failed and succeeded, been hurt and healed, doubted and grown. It means trading absolute statements for honest ones. Instead of, I'm not good enough, the story becomes, I'm learning. Instead of, this always goes wrong, it becomes, this is challenging, and I can respond. These shifts may seem small, but they change how the mind and body respond. They reduce threat. They create room for possibility. Over time, as thoughts are examined rather than obeyed, a different relationship with the mind begins to form. The mind becomes a tool instead of a tyrant. Stories still appear, but they are no longer automatically believed. There is a pause, a moment of recognition, a gentle curiosity. And in that moment, the power of the thought to control behavior weakens. You may still hear the story, but you no longer live inside it. You carry it lightly aware that it is one interpretation, not the truth itself. When toxic thoughts are seen for what they are, unexamined stories, their grip loosens. They lose their ability to define you. They stop dictating what you attempt and what you avoid. And while they may never disappear completely, they no longer run the show. They become background noise rather than the main narrative. In that shift, clarity grows, not because the mind is silent, but because it is no longer believed without question. What you carry in your mind in the morning becomes the tone of your entire day. Long before the first conversation, before the first decision, before the first challenge appears, the emotional direction of the day is already being set. The mind does not start fresh each morning unless it is guided to do so. Instead, it reaches backward and forward at the same time, pulling in unfinished thoughts from yesterday and imagined problems from tomorrow. Whatever's allowed to settle in those early moments quietly shapes how everything else will be interpreted. When you wake up with worry, the day feels heavy even when nothing has gone wrong yet. When you wake up with resentment, neutral events feel personal. When you wake up with fear, uncertainty feels like danger instead of possibility. These feelings don't stay contained in the mind. They leak into posture, tone of voice, patience, and perception. The same event can feel manageable or overwhelming depending on what you were carrying internally when the day began. That internal state becomes the lens through which reality is viewed. The morning mind is especially influential because it is open and impressionable. The boundaries between thought and identity are thinner. Whatever thought arrives first feels more important simply because it arrived early. This is why unresolved emotions tend to surface in the morning. The mind uses the quiet to bring unfinished business to the front, not because it wants to harm you, but because it wants closure. The problem is that closure rarely comes from replaying the same thoughts without reflection. Instead, repetition strengthens emotional patterns, turning momentary feelings into an all-day mood. Carrying stress into the morning does not prepare you for the day, it burdens you before you begin. The body responds to that stress as if a threat is already present. Muscles tense. Breathing becomes shallow. Focus narrows. In this state, even small obstacles feel larger. Conversations feel harder. Decisions feel riskier. None of this is the day is objectively more difficult, but because your nervous system has already decided that it is unsafe. And once that signal is sent, the mind searches for evidence to support it. This is how a single thought in the morning can snowball. A worry becomes a distraction. A distraction becomes a mistake. A mistake becomes self-criticism. And suddenly, the story of the day is written, not by events, but by the internal tone that was set before those events occurred. The danger lies in believing that the tone is caused by circumstances, when in reality, it is often carried in quietly from the start. The mind likes consistency. Once it adopts a certain tone, it looks for ways to maintain it. If you begin the day feeling inadequate, the mind will notice every comment that seems critical and ignore those that are supportive. If you begin the day feeling rushed, the mind will interpret delays as personal obstacles. This selective attention reinforces the original emotional state, making it feel justified and unavoidable. Over time, this pattern becomes so familiar that it feels like personality when it is really just a habit. What you carry in the morning is often invisible to you because it feels normal. Many people have lived with low-level anxiety, self-doubt, or tension for so long that it feels like the default setting. They assume this is just how life feels. But default does not mean inevitable. It means unexamined. The fact that a tone has been repeated does not mean it is permanent. It means it has been practiced. The morning offers a rare opportunity because it is a natural reset point. The day has not yet accumulated evidence. Interactions have not yet happened. Mistakes have not yet been made. This makes the morning a powerful place to influence how the day unfolds. Not by controlling outcomes, but by choosing what mental and emotional weight you are willing to carry forward. You cannot stop thoughts from appearing, but you can decide which ones you pack for the journey ahead. Carrying clarity into the morning does not mean forcing yourself to feel good. It means creating enough space to observe what is present without immediately identifying with it. A feeling of heaviness can be noticed without being accepted as the tone of the day. A thought of fear can be acknowledged without being promoted to a prediction. This subtle distinction changes everything. When feelings are observed rather than carried, they lose some of their power to define the day. The tone you carry influences how you treat other people as well. When the mind is burdened, patience thins. Listening becomes selective. Empathy becomes harder to access. A short interaction can turn tense not because of what was said, but because of what was already present internally. On the other hand, when the morning begins with mental spaciousness, there is more room for curiosity, understanding, and restraint. The same words land differently. The same situations feel more manageable. Energy follows attention, and tone follows energy. If your attention in the morning is scattered across worries and unfinished business, your energy is divided before the day begins. This creates a sense of fatigue that has nothing to do with sleep and everything to do with mental load. Carrying unresolved thoughts is exhausting. Each one consumes a small amount of focus, and together they drain the capacity needed for creativity, problem solving, and connection. What makes this especially important is that the tone of one day often spills into the next. An unresolved day becomes the emotional starting point for the morning that follows. Stress carried overnight becomes tension upon waking. This is how weeks and months begin to feel heavy, even when individual days are not particularly dramatic. The accumulation of unexamined mornings creates a baseline of unease that feels difficult to escape. Changing what you carry in the morning is not about eliminating problems. Problems will still exist. Challenges will still arise. But the difference lies in whether you meet them with clarity or with clutter. A clear mind does not guarantee an easy day, but it does increase the likelihood of a steady one. It allows you to respond instead of react, to choose instead of default, to engage instead of endure. When you begin to pay attention to what you carry in the morning, you may notice how often you pick up thoughts that don't belong to the present moment. Regrets from the past. Imagined outcomes from the future. Expectations that were never yours to begin with. Each one adds weight. Letting them go, even temporarily, does not mean denying reality. It means refusing to carry unnecessary baggage into a day that has not yet asked for it. The tone of your day is not decided by the alarm clock or the schedule ahead. It is shaped by the internal atmosphere you allow to settle first. Over time, as this awareness grows, mornings become less about bracing yourself and more about orienting yourself. The day becomes something you step into, not something that happens to you. And that shift begins with recognizing that what you carry in your mind in the morning quietly echoes through every hour that follows. Clarity is not found by adding motivation, but by removing mental noise. This idea challenges the way most people try to fix their lack of direction. When life feels confusing, overwhelming, or stuck, the instinct is to search for more inspiration, more advice, more strategies, more input. People consume videos, quotes, podcasts, and opinions, hoping that the next piece of motivation will suddenly make everything clear. But clarity rarely arrives through accumulation. More often, it arrives through subtraction. Mental noise is created by excess. Excess information, excess self-judgment, excess expectations. The mind was never designed to process the constant stream of stimuli it now receives. Every notification, headline, opinion, and imagined scenario competes for attention. None of them ask permission, they simply arrive and demand to be considered. Over time, this creates a background hum in the mind that feels normal, but quietly drains focus and energy. In that environment, motivation becomes a temporary surge, not a solution. Motivation is like turning up the volume on a radio that's already full of static. For a moment, it feels powerful. The words resonate, the energy rises. But the static remains. Once the surge fades, the confusion returns. This is why motivation often feels short-lived. It doesn't address the underlying problem. It adds more input to a system that is already overloaded. Clarity, on the other hand, requires space, and space cannot be created by adding more. Mental noise often disguises itself as productivity. The mind jumps from one thought to another, one plan to another, one worry to another, creating the illusion of movement. But business is not clarity. Thinking about everything at once is not the same as thinking clearly about one thing. Noise fragments attention, and fragmented attention cannot see the whole picture. When the mind is noisy, even good ideas feel confusing because there's no quiet place for them to land. Much of this noise comes from internal sources rather than external ones. Self-criticism plays on repeat. Old conversations are replayed with new endings. Imagined futures are analyzed in detail, often with worst-case outcomes. These thoughts feel important because they are emotionally charged, but emotional charge does not equal relevance. Many of these thoughts serve no purpose other than to keep the mind occupied. They do not solve problems, they rehearse them. Removing mental noise begins with recognizing that not every thought deserves engagement. The mind produces thousands of thoughts a day, many of them contradictory. Treating each one as significant creates chaos. Clarity emerges when you learn to let thoughts pass without attaching meaning to them. This does not require force or suppression. In fact, trying to silence the mind often creates more noise. Instead, clarity comes from non-participation, from choosing not to follow every mental thread to its conclusion. One of the greatest sources of noise is the belief that you must have everything figured out. This belief creates constant pressure to analyze, decide, and predict. The mind stays busy trying to control outcomes that are not fully controllable. This ongoing effort produces anxiety disguised as responsibility. Letting go of the need to know everything does not make you careless, it makes you present. Presence reduces noise because it brings attention back to what is actually happening rather than what might happen. Another source of noise is comparison. The mind measures progress against others, often without context. Social media amplifies this by presenting curated highlights as full stories. The mind absorbs these images and quietly asks, why am I not there yet? This question rarely leads to clarity. It leads to pressure, self-doubt, and distraction. Removing this noise requires remembering that clarity is personal. It is not found by aligning with someone else's timeline, but by understanding your own. Noise also comes from unresolved emotions. Feelings that were never acknowledged continue to speak through thoughts. Frustration turns into irritation. Sadness turns into apathy. Fear turns into overthinking. The mind uses thoughts to keep emotions alive when they have not been processed. Removing this type of noise does not mean thinking differently. It means feeling honestly. Allowing an emotion to be experienced without analysis often quiets the mind more effectively than any motivational speech. When mental noise decreases, something interesting happens. You don't suddenly feel more excited. You feel steadier. Decisions feel less urgent and more obvious. You stop forcing answers and start noticing them. Clarity has a calm quality to it. It does not shout. It does not rush. It often arrives as a simple sense of this matters or this doesn't. But that simplicity can only be heard when the background noise fades. People often fear silence in their minds because silence feels like emptiness. But emptiness is not the absence of meaning, it is the absence of distraction. In that space, priorities reorganize themselves. You realize which worries were unnecessary, which goals were imposed, which desires were genuine. This realization does not come from motivation, it comes from listening. And listening requires quiet. Removing mental noise is not a one-time act. It is a practice. Noise returns because life is noisy. The world constantly offers new inputs, and the mind constantly generates reactions. The goal is not permanent silence, but awareness. The ability to notice when noise has taken over and gently step back. Each time you do this, clarity becomes easier to access. Not because life becomes simpler, but because your relationship with your thoughts becomes healthier. When clarity is present, motivation becomes secondary. You don't need to hype yourself up to act on what feels clear. Action flows more naturally because it is aligned rather than forced. You may still need effort and discipline, but you no longer need constant encouragement. You know why you are doing what you are doing, and that knowing provides a quiet, sustainable energy. Clarity feels different from motivation. Motivation is loud and emotional. Clarity is quiet and grounded. Motivation pushes you forward. Clarity pulls you in the right direction. And the path to clarity does not run through more information, more inspiration, or more mental effort. It runs through subtraction, through letting go of unnecessary thoughts, unnecessary comparisons, unnecessary pressure, and unnecessary noise. When the mind becomes less crowded, what truly matters becomes easier to see not because it changed, but because everything else finally stepped out of the way. Your mind works best when it serves your purpose, not your fear. Fear is loud, urgent, and convincing. It speaks in absolutes and worst-case scenarios. It tells you what could go wrong, what you might lose, who might judge you, and why now is not the right time. Purpose, on the other hand, is quieter. It does not rush you. It does not threaten you. It reminds you of why you started, what matters to you, and who you are becoming. The problem is not that fear exists. The problem is that fear is often put in charge of a tool that was meant to serve something higher. The mind is a remarkable instrument. It can plan, imagine, analyze, and create, but is also highly sensitive to perceived danger. When fear takes the lead, the mind shifts into protection mode. Its job becomes avoiding pain rather than pursuing meaning. In this mode, creativity narrows, risk feels intolerable, and the future looks smaller than it actually is. The mind begins to ask questions like, what if I fail? What if I'm not enough? These questions feel responsible, but they are rooted in self-preservation, not growth. When the mind serves fear, it confuses safety with stagnation. It encourages you to stay where things are familiar, even if they are unfulfilling. It frames comfort as wisdom and avoidance as intelligence. Opportunities are analyzed until they feel dangerous. Dreams are postponed until they feel unrealistic. Over time, this pattern creates a life that looks stable from the outside but feels disconnected on the inside. Not because you lacked ability, but because your mind was busy protecting you from imagined threats instead of helping you move toward what mattered. Fear often disguises itself as logic. It presents well-constructed arguments for why something is not the right move. It uses past failures as evidence and future uncertainty as proof. The mind, when aligned with fear, becomes an excellent lawyer for limitation. It builds a case against action using selective facts and emotional memories. And because the arguments sound reasonable, they are rarely questioned. But reasonable does not always mean true. It often means familiar. Purpose asks different questions. It asks, what feels meaningful? What aligns with who I want to be? What is worth the discomfort? These questions are not reckless. They are intentional. When the mind serves purpose, it still considers risks, but it does not let them dictate direction. It evaluates fear without surrendering to it. It understands that discomfort is not always a signal to stop, and uncertainty is not always a sign of danger. The challenge is that fear feels urgent, while purpose feels patient. Fear demands immediate attention. Purpose requires reflection. In a fast-paced world, urgency often wins. The mind reacts before it reflects. Decisions are made to reduce anxiety rather than to increase meaning. And once this becomes habitual, it feels normal. People begin to believe they are being practical when in reality they are being led by avoidance. When the mind serves purpose, its role changes. Instead of scanning for threats, it scans for alignment. Instead of rehearsing everything that could go wrong, it considers what is required to move forward. It becomes a problem solver rather than a problem amplifier. Obstacles are still noticed, but they are approached with curiosity rather than dread. The question shifts from how do I stay safe to how do I stay true? Fear narrows time. It pulls attention either backward to past pain or forward to imagined disaster. Purpose anchors attention in direction. It connects the present moment to a larger narrative. When the mind is connected to purpose, setbacks are interpreted differently. They are no longer evidence that you should stop, but information that helps you adjust. Failure becomes feedback instead of a verdict. This shift dramatically changes how challenges are experienced. Many people believe they need to eliminate fear to move forward. That belief itself is a trap. Fear does not disappear when you wait for confidence. It disappears when you act in alignment with purpose despite its presence. When the mind is serving purpose, fear becomes a signal rather than a ruler. It is noticed, acknowledged, and then placed in context. It no longer gets the final say. The mind serving fear tends to overestimate risk and underestimate capacity. It assumes you are less resilient than you actually are. It forgets how many times you have adapted, learned, and recovered. Purpose corrects this distortion. It reminds the mind of your values, your intentions, and your ability to grow. When the mind remembers these things, fear loses some of its credibility. This does not mean ignoring practical considerations. Purpose is not impulsive, it is grounded, but it understands that no meaningful path is completely free of uncertainty. When the mind serves purpose, it accepts uncertainty as part of the process rather than a reason to avoid it. Planning becomes supportive instead of restrictive. Strategy becomes a tool, not a shield. Over time, the difference becomes visible in daily choices. When fear leads, choices are made to minimize exposure. When purpose leads, choices are made to maximize alignment. One approach shrinks life slowly and quietly. The other expands it gradually and sustainably. The external actions may look similar at times, but the internal experience is vastly different. One feels tense and constrained. The other feels challenging but coherent. The mind is always serving something. If it is not consciously aligned with purpose, it will default to fear. This is not a personal failure, it is a biological tendency. Awareness is what allows a different choice. Each time you notice that your thoughts are focused solely on what could go wrong, you have an opportunity to ask what actually matters. Each time you feel the urge to retreat, you have a chance to check whether that urge is coming from wisdom or from fear. When the mind consistently serves purpose, trust begins to develop. Not blind trust in outcomes, but trust in your ability to respond. This trust reduces the need for constant mental rehearsal. You stop trying to control every variable. You focus on showing up with intention. And in that state, the mind becomes clearer, calmer, and more effective. Not because fear is gone, but because it is no longer in control. A mind in service of purpose is not free from doubt, but it is guided by direction. It knows what it is working toward, even when the path is unclear. That sense of direction acts as an internal compass. It doesn't eliminate storms, but it prevents you from drifting aimlessly within them. The mind becomes a navigator rather than a guard, helping you move forward instead of keeping you locked in place. Morning clarity is a daily decision, not a one-time breakthrough. Many people are waiting for a moment that will change everything, a single realization, a powerful insight, or a perfect morning routine that will permanently silence confusion and doubt. They imagine that clarity arrives like a switch that flips once and stays on forever. But clarity doesn't work that way. It behaves more like alignment than achievement. It must be chosen repeatedly, especially in the ordinary, unremarkable mornings when motivation is low and distractions are high. Each morning begins with a choice, whether you notice it or not. The choice is not about what you do first, but about how you relate to your thoughts. Before the day makes any demands, the mind offers a familiar set of patterns. Worries from yesterday resurface. Expectations about the day form quickly. Old narratives reappear, dressed up as practical concerns. These patterns are efficient because they are rehearsed. The mind defaults to them because it knows them well. Morning clarity begins when you interrupt that default, not by force, but by awareness. A breakthrough implies permanence. A decision implies responsibility. Clarity asks for the second, not the first. It requires participation. This is why clarity feels fragile at times. It can be present one morning and absent the next. This inconsistency is not a failure. It is a reflection of being human. The mind is influenced by sleep, stress, emotion, and experience. Expecting it to remain perfectly clear without daily care is like expecting a room to stay clean without ever tidying it. When people chase a breakthrough, they often overlook the small, quiet choices that actually shape their mornings. They look for dramatic shifts and miss subtle ones. They underestimate the power of choosing not to check certain things immediately, not to engage certain thoughts, not to replay certain conversations. These small decisions don't feel transformative in the moment, but they compound. Over time, they create a different baseline, not because life becomes easier, but because the mind becomes less reactive. The idea of a one-time breakthrough is appealing because it removes effort. It suggests that once you get it, clarity will maintain itself. But clarity is not self-sustaining in a noisy world. It is challenged daily by information overload, emotional residue, and habitual thinking. Each morning presents new inputs and new opportunities for distraction. Without a conscious decision, clarity is quickly crowded out by urgency and routine. Morning clarity does not require perfect conditions. It does not depend on how early you wake up, how long you meditate, or how positive you feel. It depends on intention. Intention to notice what is happening in your mind before it starts running the day. Intention to slow down enough to observe rather than immediately react. This decision can be made in a few moments, but it must be made consciously. There are mornings when clarity feels accessible and mornings when it feels distant. On difficult mornings, the temptation is to give up on clarity altogether and tell yourself that today will just be one of those days. But clarity is not the absence of difficulty. It is the ability to see difficulty without being consumed by it. Choosing clarity on a hard morning does not mean you suddenly feel calm. It means you are honest about what you are carrying and deliberate about what you add. A daily decision implies repetition, and repetition builds familiarity. When you repeatedly choose to create even a small amount of mental space in the morning, the mind learns that it does not have to rush. It learns that not every thought needs immediate action. Over time, this becomes easier, not because the mind stops producing noise, but because you stop treating noise as a command. One of the most important aspects of this daily decision is letting go of judgment. When clarity is framed as a breakthrough, the absence of clarity feels like failure. This creates frustration and self-criticism, which further clouds the mind. When clarity is framed as a daily decision, inconsistency is expected. Some days you choose well, some days you don't. What matters is not perfection, but return. The willingness to come back to clarity again and again without making its absence mean something about you. Morning clarity is also shaped by what you choose to carry forward from the previous day. Unresolved emotions and unfinished thoughts don't disappear overnight. They wait quietly for the mind to wake up. Choosing clarity in the morning often means choosing to postpone certain mental tasks until later, when you have more capacity. It means trusting that not everything needs to be processed immediately. This trust reduces urgency, and urgency is one of the biggest enemies of clarity. The daily nature of clarity also means that it adapts as you do. What brings clarity at one stage of life may not work at another. The decision remains the same, but the method evolves. Some mornings require stillness, others require movement. Some require reflection, others require simplicity. The common thread is awareness. The recognition that you have a say in how your mind engages with the day. As this practice continues, clarity stops feeling like something you chase and starts feeling like something you return to. It becomes less dramatic and more dependable. You no longer expect it to solve everything. Use it to orient yourself, to check in, to remember what matters before the day tries to decide for you. This orientation does not eliminate stress, but it changes your relationship to it. A one-time breakthrough promises a permanent solution. A daily decision builds a sustainable one. The latter may seem less exciting, but it is far more powerful. It respects the reality of human attention and the rhythm of life. It allows for growth without demanding perfection. And it acknowledges that clarity is not something you achieve and keep, but something you choose and practice one morning at a time. Imagine waking up in the morning and instantly being bombarded by a storm of thoughts. Some are trivial, some are critical, and some are downright toxic. These thoughts can be like uninvited guests who linger too long, taking over your mind and shaping your day before you even have a chance to act. We often forget that while we cannot control the mere presence of thoughts, we absolutely have the power to decide which thoughts we give attention to, which we nurture, and which we let pass without consequence. This is the essence of mental discipline, the art of choosing where our focus goes and ultimately shaping the quality of our lives. Our minds are naturally restless, constantly generating ideas, judgments, fears, and memories. Some of these are automatic responses shaped by past experiences, ingrained habits, and societal conditioning. The human brain is wired to react, to notice threats, to evaluate situations constantly. This is why intrusive thoughts can feel so overwhelming. They are relentless, often appearing without invitation and sometimes without reason. But here lies the critical truth. Having a thought does not mean it has to define you or dictate your actions. A thought is merely a spark, a signal, a potential narrative. What matters is the choice we make after the spark appears. Do we feed it and let it grow into a fire? Or do we let it drift away like a cloud in the sky? When we say you cannot control every thought, but you can control which ones you follow, we are acknowledging the dual nature of the mind. On one hand, the mind is a continuous generator of mental activity. On the other hand, we possess the unique ability to be conscious participants in this activity, to discern, select, and redirect our focus. Imagine your mind as a bustling city. Thoughts are like vehicles racing through the streets. You cannot stop every car from moving, but you can decide which streets to walk down, which intersections to cross, and which roads to ignore. By consciously choosing which thoughts to engage with, you reclaim agency over your inner world. This principle is not about suppressing thoughts or pretending negativity does not exist. It is about selective attention. The mind will naturally wander toward fears, regrets, and insecurities. It has evolved to anticipate problems and avoid danger. Yet if we allow these thoughts to dominate, we trap ourselves in a cycle of unnecessary stress and self-sabotage. The power lies in recognizing a thought as it arises and evaluating its utility. Ask yourself, does this thought serve me, empower me, or bring clarity? Or does it drain me, distort reality, and pull me away from my purpose? When you make a conscious decision to follow only the thoughts that align with your values, your goals, and your well-being, you are practicing mental sovereignty. Training yourself to choose which thoughts to follow requires awareness, patience, and discipline. It starts with noticing patterns. Many people live on autopilot, allowing habitual thinking to guide their emotions and actions. They react impulsively to every passing thought, as if each one demands obedience. But by developing the habit of observation, you create a space between stimulus and response. In that space lies freedom, the freedom to pause, reflect, and decide. Mindfulness practices, journaling, or even simple daily reflection can help cultivate this awareness. The more you practice noticing thoughts without immediately acting on them, the stronger your ability becomes to select only those that are beneficial. Another crucial aspect is understanding the difference between fleeting thoughts and core beliefs. Fleeting thoughts are often random, transient, and influenced by external circumstances. Core beliefs are deeply ingrained convictions about yourself and the world, often formed early in life. While fleeting thoughts can be dismissed or redirected, core beliefs may require deeper introspection and sometimes conscious reprogramming. By interrogating our beliefs and the stories we tell ourselves, we gain insight into why certain thoughts grab our attention so readily. When a negative thought arises, you can ask, is this my mind's automatic reaction? Or is it grounded in a truth I want to live by? This discernment allows you to engage selectively with thoughts that reinforce your growth rather than hinder it. Choosing which thoughts to follow also requires courage. Some thoughts are uncomfortable yet necessary, such as acknowledging a difficult truth or confronting a fear. Others are seductive distractions, offering temporary comfort but long-term detriment. Courage does not mean ignoring all discomfort. It means distinguishing between discomfort that leads to growth and discomfort that leads to stagnation. When you follow thoughts that challenge you constructively, you cultivate resilience, creativity, and insight. When you ignore toxic thoughts that breed doubt, resentment, or fear, you protect your energy and mental clarity. The mind becomes a powerful tool rather than a chaotic battlefield. Our environment, too, influences which thoughts we are drawn to. Constant exposure to negativity through news, social media, or toxic relationships feeds unhelpful thought patterns. Choosing which thoughts to follow also involves curating your mental diet. Surround yourself with ideas, experiences, and conversations that nourish your mind. When you consciously select external inputs that align with your values, your mind naturally produces thoughts that support your growth. It is not a matter of avoidance, but of intelligent engagement. You cannot control every thought from outside, but you can manage the environment that shapes those thoughts. Practice is essential because the mind will always generate unwanted thoughts. It is natural for negative, anxious, or unhelpful ideas to appear uninvited. What matters is the response. Do you give them space, replay them in your head, and let them dictate your mood? Or do you acknowledge them, thank them for their presence, and shift focus to a thought that serves your purpose? This simple act, repeated consistently, strengthens mental discipline and builds resilience. Over time, following the right thoughts becomes habitual, and you begin to notice a profound shift in how you experience your inner world. It is also important to remember that thoughts are not facts, they are interpretations, possibilities, predictions, or memories. Treating every thought as truth is a trap that leads to unnecessary stress and distorted perception. By recognizing thoughts as provisional rather than definitive, you empower yourself to choose wisely. You become the curator of your mind, selecting ideas, beliefs, and narratives that align with your goals, values, and sense of self. This process transforms the mind from a passive receptacle of random activity into an active instrument of clarity and purpose. Finally, controlling which thoughts you follow nurtures emotional intelligence. Thoughts generate emotions, and emotions influence behavior. By choosing which thoughts to engage with, you regulate not just your mental state, but your emotional and behavioral responses. You break the automatic chain of thought leading to reaction, and instead, cultivate a deliberate approach to life. This level of self-mastery is transformative because it affects every aspect of your existence: relationships, work, creativity, and overall well-being. You are no longer a prisoner of random thoughts. You are an architect of your own mental landscape, consciously shaping the narrative of your life. In the end, while you cannot control the endless stream of thoughts that your mind produces, you can control which ones you allow to take root, grow, and influence your actions. This is not a small skill. It is the cornerstone of mental freedom, emotional resilience, and personal growth. By choosing which thoughts to follow, you reclaim control over your mind, your emotions, and ultimately the direction of your life. Is a lifelong practice, but one that pays dividends in clarity, focus, sense of empowerment that is unmatched by any external circumstance. Every moment you make this choice, you strengthen your ability to live intentionally, to act with purpose, and to navigate life with calm, clarity, and confidence. The mind will always think, but you decide which thoughts define your journey. A clear mind is often imagined as a blank canvas, a void free of thought, free of distraction, free of noise. Many people believe that clarity means emptiness, a state in which nothing occupies the mind and nothing pulls at attention. But that is a misconception. A clear mind is not empty, it is aligned. It is a mind in which thoughts, focus, and intention are organized, coherent, and directed toward purpose. It is not about suppressing thought or denying the natural flow of ideas. It is about harmonizing the mind so that it works with you rather than against you. Alignment in the mind brings clarity, peace, and decisive action because it allows you to move with focus, guided by intention rather than pulled by randomness. Our minds are naturally cluttered. Every day, millions of thoughts pass through our consciousness. Some are fleeting, some are repetitive, some are toxic, and some are inspiring. Without alignment, these thoughts compete for attention, creating inner chaos. The result is stress, indecision, procrastination, and distraction. Alignment, however, is like tuning an orchestra. Each thought, like an instrument, is placed in the right context, playing the right note at the right time. A clear mind does not mean silence. It means the right thoughts are prominent, while unhelpful noise fades into the background. When the mind is aligned, energy is directed efficiently, creativity flows more freely, and actions become purposeful. Alignment begins with awareness. It is impossible to align a mind you do not observe. Awareness is the act of noticing your thoughts without judgment, of recognizing the patterns and recurring themes that occupy mental space. Many people drift through life on autopilot, allowing their thoughts to wander unchecked, reacting impulsively to whatever emerges. This lack of awareness is the breeding ground for mental clutter. When you cultivate the ability to watch your thoughts, to notice the repetitive, distracting, or toxic ones, you create the first base for alignment. Awareness allows you to see which thoughts serve your purpose and which ones sabotage it. Once awareness is established, the next step is prioritization. Not every thought deserves attention, and not every thought requires action. Alignment is the deliberate act of prioritizing the thoughts and ideas that matter most. This involves asking questions such as which thoughts support my goals, my values, and my well-being, which thoughts lead to growth, clarity, and productive action, which thoughts are merely distractions or reactions to external pressures. By identifying the thoughts that deserve focus, the mind naturally begins to organize itself. This prioritization acts like a filter, letting in the relevant and letting go of the irrelevant. Through this process, mental energy is conserved and focused, reducing overwhelm and fostering clarity. Alignment also involves understanding the connection between thoughts, emotions, and actions. Thoughts generate emotions, and emotions drive behavior. When your mind is aligned, your thoughts create emotions that serve your purpose rather than hijack it. A clear, aligned mind can acknowledge emotions without being controlled by them. For example, worry is a thought that produces anxiety, which often leads to inaction. An aligned mind recognizes worry, examines it, and decides whether it is productive. If the worry serves problem solving or preparation, it is engaged. If it leads to fear and stagnation, it is observed and released. Alignment is the bridge between cognition and action, ensuring that your mind guides your behavior constructively rather than destructively. Focus is another essential element of alignment. The human mind is naturally drawn to novelty, conflict, and drama. This is why distractions are so pervasive and why mental clutter is a constant challenge. Alignment is the skill of focusing deliberately on what is essential, ignoring what is trivial or harmful. A clear, Aligned mind channels attention like a laser, concentrating on tasks, ideas, and actions that matter most. This does not require ignoring reality or suppressing creativity. Instead, it is the conscious choice to dedicate mental resources to what will have meaningful impact. Focus is not a passive state, but an active one, maintained through discipline, intention, and clarity of purpose. Intentionality is at the core of a clear mind. When the mind is aligned, thoughts do not drift aimlessly. They are guided by intention, by the purpose and direction you have consciously chosen. This intentionality is what distinguishes a clear mind from a blank mind. A blank mind is empty, potentially stagnant, and reactive. An aligned mind is proactive, strategic, and deliberate. Every thought has context, every idea has a purpose, and every action is informed by deliberate choice. This level of alignment allows you to respond to challenges with composure, make decisions with clarity, and maintain inner peace even in the midst of external chaos. Practices that foster alignment are varied, but they share the common principle of deliberate engagement with the mind. Mindfulness, meditation, journaling, reflection, and goal setting are all tools that help structure mental activity. Mindfulness teaches you to observe thoughts without attachment, allowing you to separate what is useful from what is distracting. Journaling and reflection help externalize thoughts, providing clarity and perspective. Goal setting aligns daily mental activity with broader life objectives, ensuring that energy is spent on meaningful pursuits. These practices do not create emptiness, they cultivate order and coherence within the mind, transforming scattered thoughts into a clear, aligned mental landscape. A clear mind also recognizes the importance of timing. Alignment is not about forcing every thought into order at all times. It is about knowing when to engage, when to pause, and when to let go. Some thoughts require immediate action, others benefit from incubation and reflection. Some emotions need to be felt fully before clarity emerges. A mind aligned with itself understands this rhythm and works in harmony with it, rather than struggling against it. This temporal awareness prevents burnout, reduces stress, and allows creativity and insight to emerge naturally. Clarity and alignment are deeply interconnected. A cluttered mind cannot see clearly. It is obstructed by noise, fear, doubt, and distraction. Alignment clears the fog by organizing mental energy, focusing attention, and harmonizing thoughts with intention. When the mind is aligned, it becomes a powerful instrument for problem solving, creativity, and decision making. It allows you to see connections, anticipate outcomes, and act with precision. It is not about having no thoughts, but about having the right thoughts in the right order at the right time. Alignment transforms the mind into a tool of clarity, efficiency, and insight. Finally, a clear mind aligned with purpose fosters resilience. Life is unpredictable, and challenges are inevitable. A scattered, reactive mind is easily overwhelmed, lost in the turbulence of circumstance. An aligned mind, however, remains centered, even in chaos. Because its focus, energy, and intention are coherent, it can adapt, respond, and recover without losing direction. Alignment is not a one-time achievement, but a continuous practice. Every day, every moment, the mind generates thoughts. Each thought presents an opportunity to maintain alignment or drift into distraction. By consistently choosing alignment, you cultivate a mental state that is not only clear but resilient, capable of navigating complexity with composure and strength. A clear mind is therefore not a void. It is an orchestra, a carefully tuned system, a landscape in which every thought, emotion, and action is in harmony with intention. It is a mind in which mental energy is focused, unnecessary noise is filtered, and actions are guided by clarity and purpose. It is the opposite of chaos, but it is not emptiness. It is the deliberate organization of mental life, the art of alignment, and the foundation for a life lived with intention, insight, and meaningful impact. When your mind is aligned, you are not only clear, you are capable, empowered, and ready to engage with the world in the most effective way possible.